Hello. Hello. Good to see ya. I'm gonna let all one of you get settled in, and I'm gonna start. Alright, I guess I'll start chit-chatting and answering some questions and doing whatnot before we actually technically get started. Hey, Clint, how you doing, buddy? How's life? Hello, Mia. I'm gonna come on here and I have a ghost story, something crazy that happened to me when I was in high school. Yep, that's what I'm gonna do. And then I'm gonna read a story, and that's pretty much the gist of it, and maybe do a little Q&A if anybody sticks around that long. I sent Brenda an invite, and I'm not actually gonna start digging into the real story for another 6 minutes. I'm just letting everybody get in and do whatever they want to do. Hello, hello. Just grandma in her nightgown. Yeah. Quite terrifying. What else do I have to talk about? I wrote a book, some collection of short stories. I actually have 3 collections of short stories out now. That's 32 total short stories. That one's not new. That one was my first collection. I published that one a bajillion years ago. I actually have a complete other one that's sitting on my computer right now, but I'm trying to get a small press, and I actually have almost another finished manuscript as well. The self-publishing journey for me has not been going well. It's been heartbreaking a lot lately. I put in an insane amount of work into what I do and into marketing and into everything, and I am perpetually on the back burner. I'm never on anybody's priority list. I just remain forever in people's TBRs. No stores really pick me up. I've been shunned out of libraries for whatever reason. I don't know. So it's very difficult, and I've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this for over a decade, and it is... one person can only take so much bullshit before they get tired of it, and so I'm going to try an alternate route. And I'm not trying to be ungrateful. I mean, everybody seems to be, helping me by allowing me to do interviews on their shows and stuff, but for whatever reason, that and all of the work, I go above and beyond to try to do these intricate marketing plans that don't work. So most people will come on here and do a pitch like, oh, hey, I wrote this book, blah, 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 and it takes them, 25 seconds, and they get 15 sales, whereas I'm in a makeup chair for an hour, and I get 0, and it kills me, just perpetually doing something. I have my own niche where nobody else I have ever seen market the way that I do, and it doesn't work, and I've tried it a million times. It's exhausting at this point, to the point where, during the pandemic, I erased almost all of my social media presence entirely, and I just stopped marketing because I couldn't take it anymore. And then I think I went back into it in 22 and tried again and took different marketing strategies and different alternate routes, and kind of here I am again, like in the exact same spot. I'm literally right where I left off. Like it nothing. So, I'm on the verge of giving up and deleting all my social media again and going into the darkness again, because it's kind of a waste of time at this point. That doesn't mean that I would stop writing, it just means that I would stop marketing, pretty much. But enough of me crying and my palaver. Nobody cares. On with the show. Dance, monkey, dance. I even try to do like live readings and stuff in hopes that it would engage readers, but that doesn't seem to work either. And when I do lives like this, even if I lead into them for 2 or 3 days, it never really gets above like 5 people. Yeah. It's almost time. It's almost time to get going. Also, it's a lot easier to be funny in the comment section than it is in real life. You know? I don't really have any material to bounce off of. Hey, how you doing? I never know what to call you. Jay? Call you Jay. Alright, well, it's about that time. Anybody who missed the bus, missed the bus. Okay. So, I went to school, for context, I went to school out of the state. I live in Maine. I moved to North Carolina when I was about 14 or so. And I lived there until I was about 19. So, one day, my group of friends and I are kind of bored. It's like a summer night. There's no school, whatever. We're just kind of goofing off. And my friend's dad was like, hey, you guys are looking for something to do. Have you ever gone and checked out this place called Abbott's Creek? And all of us were like, no, I don't know what that is. Don't know what you're talking about. Just, and he's like, well, it's this Civil War battleground that you should really go check out. And then when you have done what you've done, we want you to come back and report to us and see what you saw, whatever. And we're all kind of looking at each other like, that's fucking weird. Alright, I guess. So, 3 of us get into my friend's car, and we drive out. And his dad had, like, given us directions exactly where to go. So, we're driving, we're goofing off, because we're teenagers, you know? Not one of us is older than probably 18, 19. And, as we're going, on the side of the road, on the passenger side of the road, we see a glimpse of what I can only describe as either a child in a Halloween costume that looked like the devil, or a little person that was dressed as a devil in the middle of the night, nowhere near Halloween. And they're standing right next to the road, like beside a mailbox, right there. And the driver, my friend D, he whips his head around at the mailbox area, looks at me, and he's like, did you just see what I saw? And I was like, yeah, that's fucking weird. So, we're both in awe at this moment. We're like looking back and forth at each other, trying to rationalize it, like, what the hell could it be? We go further down the road, still fresh in our minds, and there's like this train track. And the car, like, begins to sputter, like it's about to break down. Like, it just starts losing power, and the engine just keeps going. And he's trying to give it more gas, and it's slowing down as we crawl over a set of train tracks. And then after we get onto the other side of the train tracks, the car resumes like it was perfectly normal, like nothing happened, right? Car comes right back to life. Whop! So, that is another bizarre thing that happens. So we park, and we're about, I don't know, a few hundred, maybe 1,000 feet away from this bridge, which is where Dee's dad told us to go. So we get out of the car, and the train tracks were still sort of in sight, right? And I'm looking over, and I see this, like, light, right? And I'm like, what the hell is that? And I go over, and I look, and I tap Tony, the other guy that was with us. I tap him on his shoulder, and I go to point back to it. And I'm like, look. And it's gone. And what I had seen, and I still swear to this moment, what I had seen was some sort of apparition that was holding a lantern and moving down the tracks toward us. But by the time we looked back, it was gone. Another bizarre thing. The three of us are just kind of looking at each other, dumbfounded, right? We're just like, what the hell? What could this possibly be? So, we continue walking toward the bridge, and we're discussing this. We're like, what could that have been? I'm trying to explain to them what I saw, but they didn't really see it, because they were both looking away. I was like, alright, all of this is bizarre. And as we're closing the distance on the bridge, we start hearing gunshots, which, for normal people, that would be deeply concerning, but considering it's, the country part of North Carolina, I wasn't as concerned, but I was like, this is odd for it to be the middle of the night and there to be so many. There was, like, a lot. It was way more than one person. And I was like, how bizarre. So, we get onto the bridge, and we're just kind of looking at each other, looking over the edge of the bridge down there on Abbott's Creek, and we're just kind of like, this whole experience up to this point has been insane. Like, bizarre, crazy. And then we start hearing what I can only describe as battle drums. Just that constant, rhythmic battle drums. And we're looking on one side of the bridge, looking down into the water, looking all across the shores, anything in sight on that side. And then two of us run to the other side of the bridge, and we're looking around the other side, trying to figure out where all these noises are coming from. The gunshots, the drums, the everything. And we're all, converging in the middle of the bridge, like, what the hell? This is weird. This is way beyond explainable. So we're all perplexed, I guess, and we're heading away from the bridge. We're like, all right, we've had enough. Let's get the hell out of here. Whatever. So we're walking the 1,000 feet or so back to the car, and I look over my shoulder, and there are 3 dogs, all black dogs with red eyes, and they are walking in this weird pattern. They're walking like this, back and forth across the bridge, like they're guarding it. Right? So, I'm doing a live.
I come in here and you're...
I'm trying to explain something.
Dinner. Come on, Raymond.
So, we're all freaked out, right? And the drums have stopped. The gunshots have stopped. And it's kind of quiet, like eerily quiet. And we're getting into the car, and we're like, this is fucking beyond belief. There's no way that this makes any sense. We can't rationalize it in our heads. So we get into the car, and we start driving out of there really fast, by the way. And as we're going over the tracks, the exact same thing happens. The car starts to sputter. It starts tacking out. The engine's revving, and it's almost like we're stuck. But we get over the tracks, car resumes, completely back to normal. We get back to Dee's house, 20 minutes later, half an hour later, and we explain what we saw and what we went through to his dad, and he said, yeah, we had a very similar experience like 20 years prior. Yep, that's pretty much the entirety of my story, Abbott's Creek. So, I told this story on a podcast called Homespun Haints. You can still find it. I told this story pretty much verbatim. And I told that like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Still can't rationalize it here. Makes no sense. Don't know. Can't really explain it. Can't really. Yeah. So, I can answer any questions before I dive into the story. If you guys just want to call me a liar, that's fine too. You don't have to believe me. I mean. Yeah, that's kind of my thought on it too. Not everything has really a detailed explanation. I still, to this day, believe that there was some paranormal something going on. Couldn't explain it, couldn't rationalize it, couldn't... It was very uncomfortable, I can tell you that. I still remember it very vividly, and that was almost 20 years ago. Unfortunately, I'm not bringing anybody up right now. He didn't really specify... he didn't really specify his exact scenario, but he did say that his experience was very similar to ours. He said that he went through a lot of the same things. I think there were a few differences, but he and his group of friends had done the exact same trip like 20 years before we had. And it was, bizarre. Yeah. It would make a good campfire story, wouldn't it? Yeah. I have had a few other experiences too, but nothing nearly like that. Alright, I guess I have a story for you. I'm going to be reading from my collection, Shadows and Keyholes, a short story called Behind the Pain. Yeah, this is available on Amazon. You can also buy it from my website if you wanted a signed copy, only in this country. I can't afford to ship them out of country right now. That's just not within my reach. Alright, buckle up, everybody. On a dreadful night, with the wind clattering the panes, I lay restless in bed, the manor, Hazelwood, that I'd always known as home, creaking and rattling its old bones. At times the thunder was so fierce it shook the house. Branches from the tree outside my bedroom tapped against the window like fingers. The lamp still illuminated my bedroom. I looked at the clock. It was the witching hour. Legends and rumors told throughout the manor came to my mind. For as long as I could recall, the staff had told each other ghost stories about the corridor outside my bedroom. The rumors always speculated on the same event, the thumping in the night when nobody else was around. The rumors said some of my family members had gone mad, and others had gone missing. They had last been seen somewhere in the manor. As a young boy, my father always told me the rumors were bosh. Nevertheless, the staff left promptly at 7, leaving me to lock the doors. I'd never felt so alone in the vast mansion as during this particular storm. I couldn't say for sure. Perhaps the remnants of these scary stories lingered in my mind. Several times I reminded myself that the things I imagined rarely happened in reality. Monsters and boogeymen were stories made for children and had no place in an old fool's heart. Lightning crackled, and the lamp flickered. I pulled the covers to my chin. At least 4 people had gone missing within the walls of the manor. The rumors hadn't bothered me before. I had thought of it all as a tale. But where had they gone? It was preposterous. They were simply tales told to keep me entertained while my father worked. The staff had also concocted tales of pictures mysteriously turning up on the floor. I remembered fears from my youth. I had believed something inhabited my closet. I never did get to the bottom of that mystery. Such fancies didn't sit well with my father. He didn't believe in monsters or anything thumping in the night, and he'd simply told me to grow up. Several taps from the branches sent shivers up my spine. Unable to sleep, I sat up in bed, keeping a keen eye on the window. Little shards of light spilled through onto the rug in checkered patterns. A shutter broke free from its housing and flapped against the brick. As if summoned by imagination, I heard a thump outside my bedroom door. What could it be? I pulled down the blanket, exposing my legs to the frigid air. Hesitant, I approached the enormous, heavy bedroom door and considered calling down the hall. Perhaps one of the staff had forgotten something and come back for it. As I stepped closer to the thick slab at the door, the boards beneath my feet moaned. Chills crept across my neck. I pulled the door open and it squealed on its hinges. The hair on my arms stood on end as I looked out. Behind me, the clatter of the shutter and the rain pressed on. The wind howled like a wolf in bursts. Nothing stood out in the shadows. I turned back toward my room with the intent of fetching a candle. A thump resonated in the hall, like something had fallen. I swallowed hard. It didn't sound like a branch or a loose shutter. A loud rustle of branches crashed against the window, followed by a crack of thunder. The light outside went off. The power went out. I turned back to my bedroom and crept toward the stand near my bed. I fetched the candle and the matches from inside a drawer. My hands shook. Lighting the candle took several matches. The light from the candle nibbled at the darkness, consuming my bedroom. I traced my steps back to the hallway, my feet cold as they touched the wooden floor. Every tick and creak drew my attention. I couldn't stop myself from looking over my shoulder. The faces of generations of elders looked back from portraits, paintings, and photographs. If the halls of Hazelwood could have spoken, they'd have told 1,000 stories. Nearly every person in those portraits had inhabited the manor during one part of their life. The thump occurred again. Closer. Suddenly it felt as if all eyes at the portrait were staring at me, following every step. Every time I looked at a picture, it seemed as though their eyes had just scurried away. Was I going mad? Madness had always been a deep fear for me. My great-grandmother had descended into mania during my childhood. Vivid memories of her cackle carrying through the halls, sharp as a knife, passed through my mind. The floorboards crackled below my feet. I saw something move at the end of the hall and lifted the candle in hopes of illuminating the shadows and exposing whatever lurked, but saw nothing. Another slow roll of thunder passed outside, followed by a thump from the hall behind me. I turned quickly. My motion extinguished the flame, leaving me in shadows. A loud bang erupted from the hall, giving me such a start that I feared I'd wet my trousers. I pressed my hand to my chest, assuring myself that my heart kept its beat. The match scratched and struck, chewing at the wick of the end of the candle until the light returned. Hastily, I walked back to the hallway. On the floor, not far from the door, lay on one of the portraits. I leaned in, shining the light on the picture, and noticed it was face down. I picked it up and turned it over. My great-uncle stared back at me from his black and white prison. He'd always had a calm, half-smile cocked on a charming face. It looked like any other black and white photograph. Blood had trickled from my great-uncle's face, and his hand now pressed against the glass. The expression of his face riddled with pain. I dropped the portrait. The scream lodged in my throat before I could let it out. Another thump occurred further down the hall, and I looked up, trying to trace the origin of the sound. Again, nothing. The light flickered as I held it closer to the picture. Instead of that charming smile, I saw agony and that trickle of blood. No one would believe my story without evidence. I lifted the frame from the floor, shaking loose glass off its face. I felt eyes upon me. Chills raced across my body. Examining both ends of the hall, I saw nothing but shadows. I pulled the portrait from its frame and held it up to the candlelight. The blood didn't look black and white like the photograph. It looked red. Had someone altered the portrait as a prank? It wasn't like my staff to play tricks on me, not if they valued their positions. Even more strangely, the image of my ancestor had begun to fade. As I watched, the man in the photograph became less and less visible. The background remained the same. As if the ink were running out, he was leaving behind a vacant background. I turned to discard the photograph. It stuck to my hand as if held by paste. Several times I tried to shake it free from my fingertips, but couldn't. My thumb was attached to the paper, as if the photo were liquid and my finger was submerged. Panic struck my heart. I shook my hand fiercely, calling out for help as the portrait slowly ascended to another finger. In desperation, I held the candle below the picture, hoping it would light a blaze. As if holding the flame to a blade, it simply rolled off the side. Fiercer, I shook my hand, begging to be freed. I even slammed it against the wall, but to no avail. I looked up from my hand to the portraits and caught them staring at me. Soon my entire hand had become one with the portrait. I dropped to the floor, trying to pry it off with my foot, which proved to be a grave mistake. As I struggled to pull both foot and hand from the photograph, I saw another portrait fall, landing on the floor with a hideous thump. The time for screaming had run out. It was all for nothing. The portrait consumed me. As I slid into it, I looked up at all the other pictures on the wall. They were staring at me, watching as I took my great-uncle's place. Their eyes were on me. Some of them turned to watch. My great-grandmother cooed and blinked. The staff wouldn't be around until morning. Then they'd only find a broken picture with me trapped inside. But it wasn't me. Not really. From the bottom of my vision, I noticed I'd taken on his suit, and probably taken on his features too. They would only hang up the picture, unless they, too, got trapped inside. There you go. Behind the Pain. If you guys like that story, Shadows and Keyholes has 10 short stories. I also have another collection called The Rejected Ones that also has 10 stories. And then my latest one was called The Diamond Highway. Yep, and that one has 12. So The Diamond Highway is different from these two because these stories have, lived out their lives in magazines and anthologies and stuff. That's the difference between Shadows and Keyholes and Rejected Ones and The Diamond Highway. And I suppose if you guys really, really wanted it and asked very nicely, I might read another one. Maybe. I still do have a little more time to kill. I have one that is not in any of the collections. It's in an anthology, but I haven't put it in anything of mine yet. I actually happen to be reading the anthology for pleasure. It's called Pocket Full of Posies, put out by Wicked Shadow Press. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them, but I have a short story in here called Aqualand. And it's about a ghost in a theme park, sort of. It's alright, I guess. You guys talked me into it. Yeah, I like you. With the face. Alright, Aqualand, by me, Clarence Carter. The pungent smell of salt water filled the air. Crowds of excited people gathered under the massive Aqualand sign. Their eager faces said the off-season had been too long. A piercing sun beat Rocco's shoulders. He waited, tapping his foot on the ground and alternating glances between the two lines. They inched forward. Grandpa Lucas stood behind them, observing the crowd. A brisk wind jostled his gray hair. The last time they'd gone, Rocco wasn't allowed to ride the bigger rides. Grandpa Lucas had joined him, making the best of what Rocco called kiddie rides. Something called vertigo prevented him from going on some of them anyway. Wafts of funnel cake overtook the ocean smell. Whirring machines and screams filled the air. Above the sign towered the main attraction, the reason Ethan begged to return, the Hammerhead. It looked much bigger than it did in the commercials, more intimidating too. A queasy feeling settled in Rocco's stomach. Even standing beneath it made him uneasy. Riding it wasn't an option, telling Ethan was inevitable. Ripped tickets and stale popcorn littered the tarmac. Families bustled about, parents chasing kids, mothers pushing strollers. Tourists descending in large groups, adding to the massive line. Beyond the gates stood a crowd, bustling back and forth. Through that crowd, Rocco noticed a teenage girl with dirty blonde hair covered in a blue baseball cap. She just stood there, unblinking, staring at him. He considered pointing her out to his brother. Before he could, she vanished behind a group. He found it strange and checked twice to see if he could find her. 15 minutes brought them to a woman in a ticket booth. She looked 20 minutes late for a break. Grandpa Lucas gave her money. In exchange, she gave him 3 bracelets. This came as a relief to Rocco, who'd been concerned they might trade tickets like last time. Security waved them through with nothing more than a glance at the bracelets. On the far side of the fence, seagulls cawed. Beyond the park walls sloshed the ocean tide. Shacks with dolphins and manatees painted on them lined the road. Rocco got distracted by a running child who nearly bumped into him. He trudged through the people, looking back at his grandfather and brother, who struggled to keep up. Distracted by the ride, Ethan almost trampled kids, hovering around a trash can with depleted ice cream cones. Focused on the people at the lights, Grandpa Lucas didn't seem fazed by the rides.
Just coming in and collect the dish, but you haven't even eaten your dinner yet.
Occasionally, he'd slow down to inspect tickets and baubles for sale in passing tents. In response to the smell, Rocco's stomach grumbled. Nearby, a child swung a hammer, hitting a pad on the ground. Sound effects jingled and lights flashed. The kid won a prize. From the highway, he'd watched with fascination as the Ferris wheel turned. It had always been his favorite. Pointing at it with great excitement, Rocco pleaded, "Let's ride the Ferris wheel. Come on, guys." Noticing how nerdy and childlike he sounded, he bit back his enthusiasm. If Ethan had any restraints, he didn't voice them. He nodded and marched forward, blocking the sun with his hand to observe the car posted at the top. The line wasn't long. To his right, people sat in the shade. Even before they took their place in line, it inched forward. A bald man behind the gate tore tickets with a practiced ease. He'd swing the gate open, allowing people inside before opening the carriage. Then he'd lock each one closed. A younger kid stood in line ahead of them. Rocco wondered if he'd passed the height test. He looked from the kid to the octopus sign and back to the kid. The man looked him over, smiled, and waved him on. That kid reminded him of when he'd gone through the same thing last time. It was always disheartening, waiting in line just to be told no. It didn't take long before they were next. Classic rock blared through a radio beside his chair. They waved the bracelets at him. A metal clasp came undone, and they were ushered into the carriage. It didn't take long before they were ascending skyward. People shrunk as they moved up the wheel. On one side, they could see the ocean. On the other, the massive parking lot where Grandpa pointed out the car. Looking over the edge, Ethan shook the carriage. If not for Rocco's response, nothing would have come of it. Knowing it bothered him, Ethan shook it again. His eyes grew wider. Rocco pleaded with him to stop, but he didn't. His knuckles turned white, gripping the railing. It wasn't until Grandpa Lucas interfered that he stopped. The ride paused at the top, allowing them the best view. Below, the people looked like ants, They weren't in that position for long before it continued, allowing the next carriage to look. Even before the ride stopped, Rocco saw the disapproval in the operator's face. As they got off, Grandpa apologized. Ethan carried on, uncaring. As they roamed, Grandpa Lucas looked at the food. This made Rocco smile. It meant the hammerhead would wait a little longer. They strolled through the long rows of shacks and trailers, weighing out their options. Rocco, like most teenagers, had the palate of a child. He liked fried food and sugar. So when he saw grilled cheese and funnel cake, he'd made up his mind. Ethan, being a couple years older, took longer to decide. He noticed a trailer cooking hot sausages and pointed it out to their grandfather. Grandpa Lucas settled for a burger. After gathering lunch, they searched for a seat. Rocco noticed some picnic tables huddled together and commented that one of them was available. Crunching through his grilled cheese, Rocco looked around, fascinated. There were a lot of things going on. Rides swirling, prizes being won, people laughing and screaming. He wished he could watch everything at once. Between two vendors, he saw her. Her hands were at her sides. She stood, still except for her head, which shook back and forth, gesturing the word no. He tapped on Ethan's shoulder to get his attention. Ethan groaned. "You got cheese on my shirt, butt crumb." Raising his finger to point at the strange girl, he stopped. Like before, she wasn't there. He searched up and down, even getting out of his seat for a better look. She'd shook her head, telling him no, and vanished. The problem was he didn't know what she'd been saying no to. Her presence remained in his head as they gathered their things and moved to the trash can. Something about her made his skin prickle. "There was this girl," he muttered. A passing group drowned out his words. If either of them heard, they didn't mention it. Grandpa Lucas stopped at a tent. Neither of the brothers cared about the stuff inside. Rarely did they have toys or games, mostly just clothes and jewelry. Impatiently, they shot glances at one another. The tension of telling Ethan he wasn't going on the ride created a knot in his stomach. Eventually, he finished looking, without buying anything. This had always irritated Rocco, who didn't see the point in looking if he didn't plan on spending money. With every step, the hammerhead drew closer. He didn't like it for its height and sound. Unlike the Ferris wheel, it made a metallic shriek. A shriek the blaring music didn't cover. Also, the people riding it screamed. When people screamed on the log flume, it was because they were having fun, not scared. The time to tell his brother was fast approaching. He didn't want to say anything because he didn't want the ridicule. Couldn't handle being treated like a baby, even if he felt like one. Also, he didn't want to let Ethan down. The words were on the tip of his tongue when his grandfather interrupted. "I think I'm going to go get some lemonade." Rocco opened his mouth, searching for an excuse to evade the hammerhead. Before he could, Grandpa Lucas had already started walking away. As he walked, he passed by the girl. This time, she wasn't just shaking her head, she was mouthing something. Distance made it difficult to read her lips. If she were saying anything, he couldn't hear her. He leaned in, trying to get her message. Ethan asked, "You're not backing out on me, are you?" When he looked from the girl to his brother, he'd lost her. He didn't have to think about it. "I'm not going." "I don't think you should either." As he said the words, he realized what she'd been mouthing, because he'd said it too. "Don't go." Ethan prepared for a protest. His brow furrowed, lips parted, but he didn't say anything. Without a word, he walked away. The crowd departed the ride, clattering off the metal platform and through the fence. Before he could catch up to Ethan, they surrounded him. He tried calling to his brother, but he was too late. Ethan had boarded the ride. Rocco was surprised with how quickly he'd gotten through the line. Even before it started, an uneasy feeling swept over him, of dread and paranoia, a burdensome feeling that made him want to cry. Searching the crowd, he hoped to see concern plastered on someone else's face. He did not. Everyone seemed occupied with their own lives, texting, chatting. A few of them were busy eating. He couldn't believe that they weren't feeling the same thing. Rocco searched the crowd, looking for her. If she were present, he planned on asking her some questions. He needed to know. That metallic screech pierced his ears. Mechanical arms hoisted and spun. Loud music clamored on as the operator tapped his foot. Less consumed with the ride and more with the crowd. The voice inside told him he was being ridiculous right before confirming his biggest fear. A woman far to his right let out a shriek. After following her gaze, he noticed legs dangling much lower than the others. His mouth fell open in disbelief. Blocking the sun, he witnessed his brother coming loose from the harness. His torso had fallen inches, burying his head into the padding. Freely, his legs swung like a Raggedy Ann doll. As the ride spun, he lost track of Ethan. More screams of terror filled the air. When it turned around again, there wasn't any denying it was him. He'd glimpsed all the other faces, even the man who'd grabbed Ethan's sleeve and tried to pull. He recognized everything, down to his brother's shoes. His heart plundered. Paralyzed by fear, he could do nothing but stare as it spun and shook, dropping his brother further and further. His breath caught in his chest, making it impossible to scream. The words and screams were a traffic jam in his throat. He couldn't watch, yet he couldn't look away either. Calls to stop the ride were drowned out by the blaring music. The operator wasn't paying attention. He'd become distracted by something in his hand. A cell phone, maybe. The man who'd been holding Ethan lost grip. All at once, he flew out, flailing in circles, spinning through the air. Rocco wanted to cover his eyes, wanted to protect himself from the carnage. It didn't seem real. Too much like something out of a movie. People fled, screaming in terror. About 300 feet away, Ethan landed in a patch of grass. Full of panic and dread, Rocco couldn't move. His brain had disconnected from his legs, eyes, and even his thoughts. All he could do was stand there, watching as it all unfolded in the most gruesome way. When he could move, he sprinted across the field and collapsed by his side. He stopped there, grateful there wasn't any blood. He didn't see the rise and fall of his chest, which mortified him. Leaning in, about to touch his chest, Ethan's eyes fluttered. A crowd formed around them. From his lips came a soft, distant groan, less powerful than a whisper. His eyes continued to twitch and flutter as if they were in the depths of a terrible nightmare. Shaking hands shuffled through his pocket for his phone. If Rocco had been more aware of his surroundings, he may have noticed others already calling for help. Fumbling to dial the numbers, he dropped it. He scrambled, grabbing it off the ground, and nearly dropped it again. When the operator answered, he pleaded with them, begged them to send an ambulance. For a long time, the woman on the other line asked questions he couldn't answer with scattered thoughts. He fought back the urge to cry. Checking their faces, he looked for his grandfather. There in the crowd, he saw the girl. She watched him, with bated breath, as Rocco screamed into the phone. Static crackled, forcing him to look away. "We're trying to get an ambulance inside the park. Don't move him." The words were twisted in his head. He could have sworn she'd said the ambulance wasn't coming. The thought terrified him, and he began hyperventilating. Tears streamed down his face as he tried to figure out what to do. The voice asked him to stay on the line, but he couldn't hear them over the whooping of his breathing. The phone fell into the grass. Everything got fuzzy as he thought he might faint. Searching from face to face, he tried to find the paramedics. One man, standing in front of him, with his mouth open, caught his wrath. "Stop staring at me and do something!" The man, who'd likely already been suffering from shock, turned and pushed his way through the crowd. He searched for his grandfather, too. For what seemed like a lifetime, Rocco stood, looking back at them, tears streaming down his face. His grandfather. The paramedics, any adult willing to take charge. They'd all failed him. When he could break the spell, he braved another look at his brother. Ethan's arms twitched. His eyes flittered open and closed. A couple of times it sounded as if he were mumbling something, but couldn't muster the strength to. Then all at once, they sprung open. Rocco gripped his brother's hand, praying it wouldn't be the last time. His eyes grew to the size of saucers, staring up into the blue sky. What the hell? Astounded, Rocco hadn't expected his brother to open his eyes, let alone speak. Rocco tried to find his words, stumbled for them, but couldn't form a sentence. Blood dribbled from between his lips. Someone from the audience told him the paramedics were coming. Ethan tried to move, but Rocco held him down. Don't. Just don't. He couldn't come up with anything better. Confused and scared, Ethan looked down at his legs. "I can't feel my legs, Rock." The The paramedic burst through with a gurney. In seconds, they'd hoisted him onto a board. Their grandfather was coming up the hill when Rocco saw him. He didn't look afraid. He didn't know the dire situation they were in. Once he got a look at the people, and Rocco standing beside the gurney, he dropped his lemonade and ran. "What happened?" Rocco collapsed in his grandfather's arms. He bawled, screaming, really. Words came from his mouth, but they weren't comprehensive. In seconds, all that bravery dissipated. A paramedic spoke, catching him up on everything they knew about the situation. Grandpa Lucas asked how it could have happened, but the paramedics were too busy to answer. They hoisted him into the back of the ambulance. Grandpa Lucas and Rocco joined. Ethan's eyes were again closed. They'd strapped all sorts of equipment to him, trying to get a read on the situation. A monitor that continued beeping let him know that he was still alive. They were using terms he didn't understand, like critical and morphine. The words he did understand scared him: broken bones and internal bleeding. In a giant burst, they pushed into the hospital. People flooded around them. Doctors and nurses raced back and forth, talking a mile a minute as they pushed him down a hallway. One of the doctors pulled him into a waiting room where they insisted they had to wait patiently while they took Ethan into surgery. The pace changed in a second. It had been all chaos and noise since he fell. Then, the wild ambulance ride and the loud and fast-moving paramedics. All at once, they were in a quiet waiting room, alone, surrounded by pictures of waterfalls and the buzz of a coffee machine. There, Rocco could do nothing but pace. He didn't know what else to do with his useless energy. Grandpa Lucas made all the necessary phone calls. While he waited, Rocco stood by a window and stared down at the street below. It glistened. At some point it had begun to rain, but he hadn't noticed. It wasn't the shiny street or the falling raindrops that caught his attention, though. No. Standing on the corner was the girl who tried to warn him. She looked up at him, nodded once, and vanished. That one tip of the head told him everything he needed to know, that things were going to be okay. By the time the doctors delivered the good news, Rocco had already stopped crying. He'd spent the remainder of his time comforting his grandfather. He knew nothing of the spirit that warned him and watched over him when they didn't heed the warning, but he was grateful for her. Although Ethan wasn't conscious when they saw him, they were thankful to hear the monitor beep, tracking his heartbeat. They hadn't found any internal bleeding, but the road to recovery would be a long and difficult one. The doctor told them he'd never walk again, but they should be glad that he lived, because the last accident they'd had at Aqualand, the girl didn't. Bada boom! That was my story, Aqualand. Thank you. I don't know if I can read a third one. Let's see, I'd have, 19 minutes left? Any questions? Anybody get any? No? Trying to think here. Sure, you want to ask about Mr. Thorpe's bell? Sure. What do you want to know? Mr. Thorpe's Bell is a short story that I wrote that's in my collection, The Diamond Highway. That's what she's referring to. Sensory imagery. Yeah, thank you. Believe it or not, that story was actually based off of a dream that I had many years ago. And periodically, there are a handful of stories in my work that have been based on dreams. I have notebooks that sit beside my bed that I write down every sensory dream that I have, and I try my best to recreate it in my work, but there's a lot of things that don't translate well, and it's kind of difficult at times. But yeah, I had a dream that my brother had fallen from a ride, essentially. And yeah, so I sort of formulated that story around that. The story that Marianne's referring to, Mr. Thorpe's Bell, is this sort of bizarre, cryptid horror story-ish. I tried to pitch it to like a younger audience, so I tried not to get too carried away with the graphic details, but essentially here in Maine, there's this town called Durham, and in this town called Durham, there's this, rumored cryptid thing called the Woofaboomus. And a friend of mine had told me the legends about the Woofaboomus and how parents would talk about it and utilize it to like keep their children behaved, that kind of thing. A story as old as time. So I really liked the idea of the Woofaboomus, and I wanted to use it in a story. Well, during the same like time frame, while I was thinking about this story, I came across this video, probably on TikTok or YouTube or something, and it was about these like dirt bikers. And these dirt bikers were like going down this weird trail that was kind of overgrown and whatever. And in the middle of this trail, they came across this bell. It was on this sort of like wooden platform, and they got off their bikes and they were sort of investigating this bell. And I thought, that's a really bizarre place for a bell. I wonder what it would be used for. And then the two ideas sort of crashed together. The idea of the Woofaboomus, the idea of the bell, and I was like, what if there were this kind of crazy old man who would summon this cryptid, this Woofaboomus, by jingling a bell, and it would come to him. And I loved the idea, and that's kind of roughly where the story came from. I thought you had a question about it, Marianne. What was it? Did I distract you? Sorry. I have a tendency to do that sometimes. Yeah, so as we discussed before, if you like what I do here, you can find my work. Oh, I answered it. Good. You can find my work, ClarenceCarterAuthor.com. You can find... it is sort of a wolf. I try not to go into too many details in the story because I want to leave some to the imagination, but I sort of give this idea that it's a bipedal, or at least sometimes bipedal, animal with sharp teeth and matted fur, and it is basically a wolf. Yeah. I have 3 collections of short stories: Shadows and Keyholes, The Rejected Ones, and The Diamond Highway. I also have other books too. A Girl Named Mishka, I saw it, that was mentioned in the comment section earlier. That is a thriller story about a serial killer who kidnaps in basically the version of a cam girl, an OnlyFans girl. Oh, thank you. I can give you the rundown of where A Girl Named Mishka came from too, if you want. I'll grab the cover of it. Hold on. Bam! I'm back! A Girl Named Mishka. There it is. This one won a Regal Summit Award. That made me an award-winning author. So, I have this friend. Her name is Sarah. Sarah and I have been friends for like a decade. And she comes from a place called Chechnya, which is basically Russia now. And her backstory is sort of a mystery. She was found in a dumpster in Chechnya, and she was abandoned by her parents. And she was moved here to America from Chechnya, and was adopted and grew up. And from there, I met her, like I said, almost a decade ago. And she was telling me this, and I told her, this was when I barely knew her, by the way. I said, I'm gonna write your backstory. I'm gonna figure out in my own fictional way where she came from, why she ended up there, blah 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 blah. Well, this book is the hardest thing that I've ever written, not from an emotional standpoint, but from a technical standpoint. This was very difficult, and it took me like 7 years to write this book, and it's not all that big either. But I took an orphan being abandoned. She wasn't abandoned in a dumpster in the story. She was abandoned kind of in the woods. And I wrote this elaborate backstory about where she came from and how she got to America. But I took a lot of liberties. My friend Sarah is not an OF girl, nothing like that. But for the sake of the story, I wanted there to be an element of, I don't necessarily want to call it lust, but it is sort of a sexy book, if you know what I'm saying. Sort of it has a few scenes in it that are a little lusty, a little zesty. And she works in that industry. And then this truck driver becomes obsessed. You also get the truck driver's backstory as well. And he becomes obsessed with her. And I don't want to spoil anything more than that. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend you take it to work. But that's kind of where the idea for that came to be. Yeah, Amazon, KDP, whatever. You can find my work there, or if you want autographed copies, my website, ClarenceCarterAuthor.com. Within the country, I can't afford to ship it out of the country right now. That's too big an ask. And also, for the on-hand stuff, you also get a bookmark from my book, The Blacktop Kings. You also get some stickers. I did this podcast called 8 Spark Stories. There are a bunch of my short stories that are professionally narrated on there. You get one of these stickers. I also did a podcast called The Writer's Block. We had like 70 episodes of The Writer's Block, where my friend Sean and I tell stories back and forth, talk about our careers, and then we tell an improvised story. They're usually either horror stories or whatever, but usually end up being ridiculously funny. That's what it boils down to be. I don't have any stickers for my ongoing podcast right now. Those two are pretty much wrapped up, but they're still available wherever you get podcasts. I do a podcast now, sort of the same idea, called Redacted Tales on YouTube. You can find that on the YouTubes. There are 9 episodes, I believe. And some of our narrator friends right here in the Book Talk community, and some of our writer friends, some of you may know Clint, who was in here earlier. Clint has a story on Redacted Tales. And so does our friend Shay. Thank you. I actually, speaking of Clint won the same award that I did, the Regal Summit Award, but not in the same year. Not in the same category either, but he has the same award that I do. All right. Before I wrap this up in 8 minutes, give you guys a last chance. Oh, Mike Minicky. That's right. I almost forgot. Mike Minicky also has a story, The Traveling Salesman. I think it was the second episode of the podcast, Redacted Tales, on YouTube. Yeah, I'll take any last minute questions. I'm going to shut it down in about 7 minutes. Go eat dinner. Go to bed early. I'm tired. It's been a long week. What? Thank you for your support, Thanks for showing up. I don't do a lot of lives like this anymore. I've grown frustrated. Oh, the makeup thing. Yeah, I should probably talk about that a little bit. I have not been doing the makeup as long as you might think. Less than a year. And hey Samantha. The makeup thing came about because my friend, the same one that I did the Writer's Block podcast with, he and I decided last year that we were going to steer a little more into film and a little less into books. So over the last year, we did 3 film festivals, and we also shot a short film. We shot a short film called Cathedral. And while we were writing the script for Cathedral, I kept thinking, there's going to be a couple of scenes that are going to be tricky to do, and I don't want to just, use ketchup as fake blood, whatever. I was like, I think I can learn how to do some pretty minor-looking cuts. And that's where the makeup journey began. I bought this, $20 kit on Amazon, and I began sculpting wounds first. And then I was like, this is really interesting. And I've always had a deep appreciation for horror movies and guys like Tom Savini. And I was like, this is kind of fun. So I used that $20 makeup kit for a long time. And then I was like, I'm going to expand a little bit, see if I can do some other things. And then over the last year, I've used those makeup skills in 2 or 3 film projects now. And it just kept expanding. It went from a kit like this big to this is my makeup bag right here, and it's overflowing. I've got makeup stuff everywhere now. So our movie Cathedral is not out yet. It's in post-production. I watched a rough cut of it a week ago tomorrow. Yeah, a week ago tomorrow. And it's looking good. There are still some continuity stuff that we're working through, and still some edits and stuff. Thank you. And I've been, as you guys can tell on TikTok here, I've been trying to utilize the makeup skills to try to help sell books. I wish it were a little more effective, but it is what it is. And also, I still want to continue a little bit further down the path of film stuff as well. I still love books, and I will still always go back to books and short stories and stuff. That's always got a place in my heart. But I do want to expand into film stuff as well. So I'm trying to grow my makeup capabilities so that I can help the indie film scene here in Maine, which there's not a huge one, but the more you do this stuff, the more you learn, and the more people you meet, and the more opportunities show up, and so on and so forth. So that's what I'm trying to do. I have had some problems with TikTok and the makeup once. I went on a live, I can't remember when, a few months ago anyway, and they had flagged me for graphic material or something. And they gave me a hard time about that. And they shut down my account for not very long. I thought it was going to be 3 days. And then I ended up protesting it pretty much. And they ended up giving it back to me the next day or later that day or something. Yeah, I've heard that Jay does some makeup too. I have yet to see it. My algorithm is bananas. It's so crazy. Yeah, somebody was asking me to do vampire makeup. I think it was Mia yesterday. I haven't forgotten. It's there somewhere in the back of my mind. I do have the teeth, and I assume that I can do it. It doesn't seem that complicated. But I'm definitely not going to do it tonight. I'm already tired as it is. Oh, yep, you and Brenda. Speaking of which, I wish Brenda had made it. You know, I feel kind of bummed because this, like, I wanted to do it late, and I did do it much later than I usually would, hoping that she'd be able to make it, but I don't know. She just couldn't make it. So, her absence, yeah, kind of sucks. And I'll try again probably this weekend. That's if you guys will have me again. And if you guys want me to read to you again or something. I don't know. But that's pretty much it for me. I think I'm gonna need to see me more. I feel like you guys see too much of me already. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. Buy the books if you're interested. Don't. If you're not, if it's not gonna be your flavor, don't bother. It's okay. I understand. I just don't get the idea that I only write horror. I do write young adult. One of my more successful books is a young adult book called Without Saying Goodbye, and it's about the troubled teen industry, essentially. And that book is so deep to my heart, and the reviews that I have gotten of it were very positive. It can be a tough read at times because the source material, it is about abuse and so on, but it is, in my opinion, one of the best things that I've ever written in my life, and I've been writing for a very long time. As I expressed later, I've been at this for, well, I've been taking it seriously for over a decade, but my love for writing actually started when I was like 14. Yeah, the troubled teen industry is rough. Really, really rough, and it's still going on to this day. And I had to go down this crazy rabbit hole and watch documentaries and stuff, and learned a lot about the teen industry to write that novel, and it was heartbreaking to go down that rabbit hole. And if my book, Without Saying Goodbye, can deter even one family from letting their kids go to one of those schools, then my book has been a success. All right. If there's nothing else, everybody, I'm tired. I'm ready to go to bed. Thank you. I don't deserve it. Thank you. Thank you. I'm not worthy. Goodbye. Good night.